You may be wasting valuable time trying to fill up forms or collect documents that are not really required for your spousal sponsorship application. So let's get through those and maybe help try to save you some time. First up is 1283 or financial evaluation. A lot of people ask if they have to fill this form out for your spousal sponsorship. So, you don't have to fill this form out for your spousal sponsorship application. Alright, so here's the guide 5289. I'm going to link it in the description below. If you scroll down, step 3, complete the application, keep scrolling down. And this is where it says if you're only sponsoring dependent children, okay, you must fill out financial evaluation 1283. So this should be your first clue. Does not apply to spousal sponsorship. It applies when you're only sponsoring your dependent child. Okay, in that, if we further go into the instructions under 1283, it says complete this form if you are sponsoring a dependent child who has a dependent child of their own. In other words, if you are sponsoring your grandchildren. So this means that for spousal sponsorship, ignore this form. You don't have to fill this out. This form is also not needed for spousal sponsorship, whether you are doing your spousal sponsorship with or without dependents. So now try to understand, spousal sponsorship with or without a dependent child is a different process than sponsorship of a dependent child. So if you're sponsoring your spouse, whether you have a dependent child or not, you are not required to fill out this form 5481. You only need to fill this form out if you're only sponsoring your dependent child. Okay? So if I can take you back to the guide 5289, again scroll down, click on step 3, complete the application, scroll down further and you will find this form 5481. But you see the heading, if you are only sponsoring dependent children, alright? So it's as clear as day here. So this form 5481 is not required when you are sponsoring your spouse, okay? Even if you have dependent children with your spousal sponsorship application. Because when you sponsor your spouse, and let's say you have an accompanying dependent, they will automatically get permanent residence along with your spouse. You don't have to sponsor them separately. This form 5481 will only come into play when, let's say you sponsored your spouse and you had a non-accompanying dependent who you did not sponsor at the time, and later, let's say 5 or 10 years down the line, you want to sponsor your child and they are a dependent child, that's when you will have to fill out 5481. Okay, but not with your spousal sponsorship application. And by the way, if you're applying for permanent residence under spousal sponsorship and you have dependent children, there is a different way, the right way to add your dependents to your application. I have covered all of that in this video that should be showing up on the cards here, and it's linked in the description below. So check that video out to learn all about how you can add your dependent children to your spousal sponsorship application. Alright, so next up is 5475 or authority to release personal information to a designated individual. And you can find this form in your guide 5289 under step 3, complete the application. Alright, where all the forms are. So if I can take you quickly to this page, this is a page specifically with instructions for 5475. And if you scroll down, it clearly says, use this form if you want to allow us to give your personal information such as the status of your application to someone who will not act as your representative. So it's important to understand the difference between 5475 and 5476. 5475 simply gives that designated individual the right to access your information and receive status updates about your application. Maybe they can change address on your behalf if you move, but no other rights. Whereas a use of a representative form is a much more powerful form, gives much more power to your representative. They can conduct business with IRCC on your behalf, meaning they can conduct back and forth of documents if IRCC were to request any on your behalf. And obviously they can also receive status updates on your behalf, meaning the principal applicant's behalf. So a representative has much more authority than a designated individual who simply will have access to your information and will receive status updates for your application. Alright, so when I sponsored my wife, I was her representative, meaning she appointed me as her representative to conduct business with IRCC on her behalf. And that's why she had to fill out this form 5476, which is a use of a representative form, and she and I both had to sign it. And being her representative already gave me access to her information and other powers also, such as conducting business with IRCC on her behalf. So in this case, there was no need for my wife to fill out 5475 to give me access to her personal information, because by filling this 5476, I already had access to her information and I could also conduct business with IRCC on her behalf. Alright. So in this case, when the sponsor is acting as a representative, you don't really need to fill out this form 5475 to give access to information to the sponsor. Same goes for your hired representative. So let's say you're working with a regulated or licensed professional. You must have filled out use of a representative form again 5476, and you and your hired representative must have both signed it. So now that hired representative already has access to your information and can conduct business with IRCC on your behalf. So now if you trust your representative to do everything right by you and to give you timely updates on the status of your application, then you don't need to fill out 5475 for your representative. Alright. So when should you really use 5475? So I can think of two use cases for this. Number one, you, the principal applicant who's being sponsored for spousal sponsorship, are taking care of the complete application yourself, meaning you have not hired a paid representative, you're not even using your sponsor as your representative, you're managing the complete application yourself. In this case, let's say you want your sponsor to also have access to your information so that your sponsor can also receive status updates about your application. Then you can fill out this form 5475 to assign your sponsor as the designated individual. This doesn't necessarily have to be your sponsor. You can assign any designated individual as long as they have a valid status in Canada. And to do that, you will have to fill out 5475. Okay. Another use case is, let's say you're working with a paid representative, but they're not very active in responding to your queries and they don't provide you status updates promptly. So in this case, you want somebody else to also track the status of your application. Then you can assign that person as a designated individual using this form 5475. Alright. This form again does not make that person your representative. That form 5475 will only give that person limited access to your information. They will be able to receive status updates. So in this case, if your representative is not really communicating with you because they're too busy or they're just unresponsive, then you'll still know your status updates through that designated individual who you have just assigned through this form 5475. Alright. So those were some of the forms that I thought I should mention are not really required for spousal sponsorship. Obviously, if I missed a few, then you can leave a note in the comment section below and let me know if you're confused about other forms that may or may not be required, and then we can clarify that. Let's look at the documents. So first of all, you need to know documents that are required for you to submit for your spousal sponsorship application. How do you find those documents? I'm glad you didn't ask. So let's head back to guide 5289. It's linked in the description below. If you scroll down, click on step 3, complete the application, keep scrolling down further, and then you will get to the document checklist and country specific requirements. Simply answer your questions here. So who are you sponsoring? Spouse. Country that the spouse is from. So let's go with India for this example. Select India again, and then simply click get checklist and forms. And here is your document checklist. Okay, so this is your document checklist 5533, which will tell you all the documents and forms that you must submit. And if I scroll down, the version is 9/2022, meaning September 2022. So if you're watching this video in November 2022, make sure this is the version that you're working with. Obviously, this can get updated. So always download this document checklist and any other form for that matter from the guide 5289, just like I showed you. Don't just Google these documents and forms and download from the first link that pops up. You may end up with a wrong version. Always go back to the guide 5289 and download from that guide. Right. So this is the September 2022 version and everything that you need to submit is all here. Okay. So make sure you provide every document and form that is listed here that corresponds to your specific case. And by the way, I've made a detailed video about all the supporting documents that my wife and I submitted for our spousal sponsorship application. I share how I procured those documents, how I prepared them for upload, how I labeled them, and where I uploaded them in the online portal. It should be showing up on the cards here and it's also linked below. Definitely check that video out. It will give you a lot of perspective on how to prepare these documents. Obviously, when I made that video last year, that document checklist was the older version and it has been updated now, but majority of the items are still the same. So definitely check that out. It's highly useful. Now, besides the items already in the document checklist, there is also a lot of confusion about some other documents that people submit, which are not really required to submit for your spousal sponsorship application. and people just waste time collecting those documents and submitting them anyway. So let's look at those documents and save you some time. Alright, so first up is educational documents, meaning your transcripts, your mark sheets, diplomas, degrees. You don't have to submit these. Okay, so we are inside the online portal. Inside the forms section, this is Schedule A 5669, which is a principal applicant form. In section C, education, it asks about the number of years of school or university education you've had and details about that education. So you, the principal applicant, simply has to provide details here truthfully and honestly, and that's it. You don't have to upload your transcripts or mark sheets or degrees in the online portal as proof of your education. It's not required. It's not mentioned in the document checklist, so you don't have to do that. Same goes for the sponsor. No need to upload any educational documents, right? Next up is employment documents. So we'll talk about the principal applicant first and then the sponsor. So for principal applicant who's applying for spousal sponsorship, no need to provide any employment documents of any kind. It's not mentioned in the document checklist, so you don't need to do that. So again, coming back to the online portal, Schedule A, Section D, Personal History. It asks about your activity for the past 10 years or so. So simply provide your employment history for the past 10 years. If you have not worked in any period, simply list unemployed. Don't leave any gaps in time. Answer honestly and truthfully, and you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to upload any proof of employment for the principal applicant. Alright, now it's a little different for the sponsor. So if I can take you to the document checklist 5533 and let's go to the supporting documents section. Under supporting documents for sponsor, if we scroll down to section 5, there is a section for employment and source of income. So this section is for the sponsor. Okay, not the principal applicant. So obviously, if the sponsor is employed, you provide the documents that are listed here. And if you're unemployed, meaning the sponsor is not working, that's fine. But then you have to provide other documents that prove that you can financially support your partner when they immigrate. So I've made a detailed video discussing proof of funds and all these employment document requirements for the sponsor. Should be showing up on the cards here, and it's linked in the description below. So check that video out for more details on how to answer this section. Alright. So there is no letter of invitation, statement of purpose or reference letter that is required from the sponsor. There is no mention of these in the document checklist. So please don't waste time collecting and drafting these documents. Now, if you come back to the document checklist real quick, and let's go straight to section 7, proof of relationship to sponsor. So if you don't answer yes to these questions 7A, 7B, 7C and 7D, then you have to provide documents that are listed in section 7E right here. In one of those documents is a mention of letters from friends and family. So these letters are actually to prove that your relationship is recognized by your friends and or family. Alright. So I actually provided a letter of reference from my sister who introduced my wife and I just to prove that the relationship was genuine and the marriage was indeed true and legal. And I shared all that letter of explanation, the format, the structure, how my sister wrote it and where I uploaded it in the online portal in this video that should be showing up on the cards here, and it's linked in the description below. So if you're looking for letter of references from family or friends to prove the authenticity of your relationship, then definitely check that video out. It should help you. By the way, did you know that if your application is stuck at a particular stage for a very long time and you don't know what happened to it, you can find out to a certain degree using GCMS notes. I've discussed all that in this video here. Click this and I'll be waiting for you.